No, you don't need the.
I'm doing this my way.
He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend.
Talking on it though, then
He
you
a
can't work
legend.
it up later.
Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and I'm sitting in a chair. Back hurts, but the research and preparation for Worlds doesn't stop. So basically, what I want to go through today are some tier lists for the players in the World Championships. This isn't going to include every team, so it's not meant to be an exhaustive list or anything, but it's just going to hopefully give you a better understanding of where I think the top lane, where top lane is at right now. So first, before I get into the individual players, I have to talk about how top lane is going right now and what I expect to happen at Worlds and what I think should happen at Worlds. So in my opinion, the only meaningful way to rank players is by their ability to create a winning difference on their team. So there are different ways to do that, and you'll see in this list that some players are able to contribute to their team in different ways and be ranked highly for it. So I'm not looking for a specific type of player, but you need to be of a certain level. And this also doesn't mean that every single one of these players is going to win lane every time, because sometimes the player isn't asked to win the laning phase, and they're just asked to stay even and then show up in team fights and help their teams win the game, because that's ultimately the goal. So in terms of how I think top lane is going to play out, there are a couple of picks that I think are going to shape the top lane meta. It doesn't mean they will end up being the most popular top lane champions, but they are important because it creates stress on the pick bans for other teams. So right now, I think that the most important top laners, or the top laners that we should expect, are Akali, Lucian, Urgot. Those are the three main ones, and it will cause other teams to bring in things like Sion, and other hyper tanks. I think that is one evolution that we will see at Worlds, is that we will have some tanks coming back into the meta. Today in EU Masters, we saw that if you're a team that picks Lucian mid and Jhin bot, and you don't have an AP damage threat, all the other team has to do is lock in a hyper tank in their last pick, and you're going to have a very difficult time winning that game. So that's our starting point. And now we can go through the D tier. So when I say that a top laner is D tier, I'm basically just saying that they are not going to be able to help their team create a winning difference in the games that they play at the World Championship. So let's start with Impact. So Impact obviously has been around for a very long time, the top laner for Team Liquid. Impact has won a World Championship, and that cannot be overstated how important that could potentially be for a team that actually has championship aspirations and the ability to win a championship. I just think that Impact is past his prime and isn't really able to carry games in the carry sense, but Impact is a very good player at going even in lane and being able to get into the mid-game team fights and late-game team fights to help his team. The problem is that I don't expect Team Liquid to be very competitive at Worlds, so Impact's playstyle is probably going to make him look worse than he actually is. If we're looking at champion pool, Set, Ornn, Mordekaiser, that just basically tells me they're trying to go even. Shen is a somewhat contested pick right now, or at least it was at the end of the playoffs in the LCS, but I'm not sure how that's really going to carry over into the World Championship. Ornn, I would not be surprised if we saw a lot of Ornn and Mordekaiser specifically from Impact. That's kind of what I expect. But that's not necessarily a good thing. I think that the way that Team Liquid treats Impact is throw him on a blind pick, and just hope that he goes even. So for that reason, I think that Team Liquid's basically telling you, like, we don't intend on using Impact to carry games, and I guess my argument would kind of be like they need that option from top lane, because if they just depend on their mid jungle to create advantages, I don't think that's really going to be a good option for them. So that's why I'm kind of low on Team Liquid in general. Next up, we have Finn. So Finn is a Kled one trick. Supposedly in solo queue, that's how he was noticed originally by professional teams, I believe. But Finn is the type of player who is often asked to play weak side, can play Gangplank, Kled. We have Renekton games, but I think a lot of Finn's success was due to Rogue's success as a whole. So if we look down here, I think that we will see Ornn, Sion, some hyper tanks. I think Wukong is definitely a possibility still, even though it's not as strong as it was previously. Kled is always an option, and I hope that Rogue goes for things like that, because it's really like when you're at a talent disparity or discrepancy. I'm not sure which word fits better, but they're both okay, I guess. You need to find new ways to win games, because you're not as good as a lot of these teams at Worlds. So hopefully they come up with some creative ways to create winning advantages. I don't know much about PK at all, the top laner for Machi. The stat lines are going to look good because they were one of the better teams at their in their league. So that's why, like, I can't really look at these numbers and glean anything from it, like the win rates or anything like that. It's really just what champions have they been playing, and it's very similar to the other champion pools. I'm not seeing anything very unique. I'm sure he played a lot of Volibear when it was overpowered. I'm sure he played a lot of Aatrox when it was overpowered. Aatrox might actually make a resurgence at Worlds. I don't see Akali. I don't see Urgot. I don't see Lucian. And I'm not saying that those champions will have like a 100% win rate or a 100% pick ban rate. It's just that they seem to be a very important part of the meta for a lot of these teams. And it's a good thing to take a look at, because it means that you're not going to force those bans away. So if I'm a team and I'm red side and I see that I'm playing up against Machi, maybe I think to myself, I don't need to worry about Lucian. I don't need to worry about Akali. I don't need to worry about Urgot. I can just ban away the mid laner or some junglers or the AD carry, and I'd still get Lucian or Akali on red side, and then that means Machi is going to have to use those bans themselves. So it's just a little bit of a draft edge there. Next up, we have Arome. I'm really not a big fan of Arome. I think that when Mad Lions does well, it's generally because of Shadow and Humanoid and Karzi, and Arome does his job, which is admirable. I can't knock him for doing his job, but I really like to see more out of top laners. So when we get into playoffs, we had 4 games of Camille, Gangplank, Shen, Mordekaiser, Ornn, Renekton. A lot of the same champions that we see from everybody else. Jax is a pretty interesting choice. Hecarim could theoretically be a contested pick. Maokai. So I don't expect Mad Lions to really go into a lot of games blind picking things like Renekton when the opposing top laner will probably be more skilled than Arome. So I would expect Arome to default into a hyper tank, or even picking a hyper tank and then looking for a lane swap or something like that. Like I said, when you're on the team that's not expected to win, you should be looking for different ways to create an advantage. Longshi is another player that is not typically asked to be the carry of their team. We do have some Gnar. I think Gnar is potentially a usable champion at Worlds. Kale could see some play if hyper tanks are just being locked in blind, because Kale will scale very well, especially if things like Ornn are being blind picked. And that's the other thing. When you have these top laners on blue side, you're going to be in a spot where you have to blind pick somewhat regularly, and that is going to be a potential pitfall for a lot of these teams. So again, Longshi, I think he's not asked to be the primary carry on his team often. Peanut is the one who's typically creating the winning advantages for his team, along with Shie. But if the meta continues to shift towards like 80 carry being the focal point of teams, that's probably bad for LGD in general. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. And last up, we have Solo. So Solo can theoretically carry, but we've seen that Solo's form recently has been pretty poor, which I don't want to get too down on Solo, because I think it's not just Solo's failure when in the finals he was basically picked on for the entire series. That is really a team failure, but it also tells you what they think. Well, it kind of helps to show what they think about the top laner. If they're asking him to play Gangplank and scale into the late game, and he continuously dies, it's a problem. But at the same time, it is a good thing that they ask him to play things like Gangplank and intend to scale and stuff like that. I'm just not sure if that's even a good strategy for FlyQuest at the World Championships. I think he will most likely revert to tank duty. But I hope I'm wrong. I mean, the more competitive the games are, the happier I am. They're much more interesting to watch. I'm going to watch all of these games. I'm not out here actively rooting for the teams that I don't think are going to do well to lose. I'm just trying to be honest with the prospects that I think a lot of these teams have. Next up, we have Broken Blade and Blippo. So I think that these are the players where we start to see they can play the tanks, and they have played the tanks in the past, but they also have additional carry upside, where they're doing it more often. So I'll start with Broken Blade. Broken Blade, we see Aatrox, Aurelia before it was really popular, Kiana, Akali, Kayle, Rumble, Kalista, Aurelia again, Jax, Lucian, Aurelia. So these are the champions where it shows me that not only can Broken Blade play the tanks, not only can Broken Blade play the carry champions, but also TSM is confident that if they put Broken Blade onto this style of champion, they will be able to win the game. Because you need to not only pick and ban correctly, you need to play out the game correctly. It is important to do both. So this it gives you more options for TSM, which is very important when you have a player like Bjergsen, who is probably going to soak up a lot of bans to begin with. You need to punish the other team for focusing all their attention on Bjergsen by giving something to Broken Blade that he can also carry the game. Blippo, I said this in one of my other videos. I think that Blippo is, like, on this tier list, I think Blippo has a chance to be... I think Blippo and Broken Blade both have the chance to be on the A level. So the difference between these tiers is really, like, the players in the A level have shown for one reason or another that they are just a little bit better than Blippo and Broken Blade. And then they... like, form-wise, but then also Blippo and Broken Blade could get up to that level. And then the separation between the A tier and the S tier is that I'm somewhat positive that these players are either the best at a particular type of play or just a very well-rounded player. So we'll go through that more later on. So let's go to Blippo. So for Blippo, we have Gangplank, Pantheon, Rengar, Singed, Urgot, Swain, Jarvan, like a ton of different champions. And it's not like, I don't want players to play champions just for the sake of playing new champions. I want them to be a part of a game plan that can help create a winning advantage. So when we see Gangplank, Rengar, Sion, Urgot, Camille, Shen, and Zillion, it shows me a lot of diverse ways to play the game. And I do think that Blippo is one of the more intelligent players from Europe. Well, maybe not intelligent, but eloquent and able to communicate why they do the things that they do. And I know that, like, professional players, some of them are given carte blanche and allowed to pick whatever they want. But for the most part, you need to be able to make a convincing argument to your coaches and your team as to why they should let you play certain champions, because it is a team effort. The other champion that I love that Blippo plays is Cho'Gath. I think it's a very smart way to look at League of Legends by getting the additional power to secure objectives, specifically Baron and Dragon, onto your team. And it's not always going to be relevant. Like, you can win games without it becoming relevant. You can lose games where it doesn't help you get back into the game. But you are creating little pockets where, even from a losing position, you can make a very high upside play. So I do like that about Blippo a lot. In terms of the A tier, we have Wonder, Bin, Doran, and Rascal. I think I did that reversed, but Doran and Rascal are the last two players. So first up, we have Rascal from Gen G, and he has played a lot of Akali, and I think Akali is going to be extremely important at the World Championships as a threat. You don't necessarily need to pick it every time, but even if it just becomes something that the other team needs to permanently ban against you, that's very valuable. Rumble isn't a great champion right now, but has received a little bit of a buff, so Rumble could theoretically come back into the meta. Set was broken at this point, and is still a very important champion in the metagame because it does its job really well. And then when we get down to the other champions that were played more recently, we again see a lot of diversity. 11 games of Renekton, some people would be upset about that. Ornn 7 games, so he can play the tank initiator role. It's not necessarily the peeling role. He doesn't have many peel champions like Maokai. But Ornn can fill that role. It's just that Ornn's not the best at doing that. Kennen, so obviously the flanking Kennen. Karma, we've seen some very interesting Karma performances out of Korean top laners where they just bring a lot of additional value through items to the team. Aurelia is a good carry champion. Nico, Silas, who's receiving a buff, Kled, Akali again. So these are all good champions to see, even Lucian. So all of the bases are covered. That's what we need to see. I might be overrating Rascal and Doran a little bit. I've never been fully convinced by them, but I'm just assuming that my bias against them is incorrect for the World Championship, and I'm going to use them accordingly. Next up, from DRX, we have Doran. And Doran is another player who has pulled out the Karma top, Camille, Kennen, Akali, Aatrox. We have Hecarim, Quinn, Rise. I don't see Rumble. Hopefully that's not a big issue going into the World Championship. I doubt that it will be a huge problem. I don't see Urgot, but still, we see a lot of the typical Korean top lane champions which dominated the spring and summer splits. And they are... It represents a diverse champion pool where you have different things that you're asked to do. So again, we should have Akali bans and Lucian bans and things like that against the Korean teams because you just have to assume that players like Doran and Rascal are capable. Next up, we have Bin and Wonder. So for Bin, Bin is only 17 years old. Bin is one of the best top laners in China, in my opinion. It's difficult for a lot of people to come to that conclusion because Suning was not dominant throughout the entire year. It was more about like having good team victories in the summer and in the summer playoffs. But I think Suning has very high upside because they are a relatively young team with a lot of skilled players. So Bin is known for Aurelia specifically. So Aurelia is going to be a flex pick between top and mid. We have seen Akali, we have seen Renekton, Wukong, Mordekaiser, Aatrox, Camille, Kale. So there is a decent amount of diversity there. Renekton is really the champion that we expect to see the most from Bin. And that is somewhat scary for Suning because personally I am someone who places a high value on the use of itemization, and drafting Renekton consistently kind of goes in the face of that. But this is Suning's playstyle, and Suning, another champion they play a lot is Jhin, and everybody knows how much I hate Jhin. But they're doing it the right way. So I am somewhat concerned because of that, and I think it could ultimately be their downfall. but I think that Bin will be able to do his job in the top lane and also surprise a lot of people when they get into top lane matchups against somebody like Wonder or somebody like Blippo or Broken Blade, who some people from the West might just, for one reason or another, think is better than Bin. Because a lot of people from around the world haven't seen these players, which is not. I mean, I'm not criticizing anybody for not watching as much League of Legends as I do. Like, I watch too much League of Legends. Like, if I wasn't giving picks and doing DraftKings and gambling on it, I wouldn't either. But that's what I do, or at least part of what I do. So, yeah, I hope people appreciate the talented players they don't know about from around the world. And that's part of the reason why I'm not as high on Wonder as a lot of other people. But even though I don't think Wonder really deserved to be in the top 20, like some other people do, I cannot deny that Wonder is an incredible top laner for G2 because Wonder can play every different style of top lane champion. And it speaks to his diversity, his understanding of League of Legends, his adaptability. We see Soraka, Sona, Janna, Bard. Like, that was from the Spell Thieves meta, which was kind of bizarre. And I don't expect that to come back for the World Championship. But it just highlights his ability to play a lot of different styles of champions. We have the Akali. I'm not 100% positive that like Lucian, Akali, and these kinds of champions are going to be scaring like Chinese teams when they go head to head. And that might just be a mistake from like Chinese or Korean teams where they kind of they don't respect the talent of the other teams enough to to play the game the correct way, which is the only reason why you would leave those kinds of champions up without like good counters prepared. But it's just like a base level of thinking. I don't expect Wonder to consistently get blown out of the water or shown up on the international stage. I think that a lot of these games will go even because teams will be respectful. But it's fundamentally different than like these players playing against each other just playing for the lane matchup. Okay, so now we're getting to the top three. I think that the three best top laners are Zoom, 369, and Nagri, and I don't think it's clear which order they belong because it really depends on what meta we see at the World Championships. So I think out of these three players, the best carry top laner is Nagri. Nagri has been known as a carry top laner for years, even when the meta does not really facilitate top lane carrying. So we see Akali, we see Kennen, and these are two fundamentally different champions in terms of how they carry. Kennen's a very good team fighter, can create the TP flanks and those kinds of things, which are able to turn around a team fight completely. Akali is much more a selfish champion, where not only is Damwon saying we have a carry top laner, they're saying like our top laner can be the most important player on our team in a game, which is not typical across the world. It is the exception to the rule, and it's not necessarily like better to be a carry top laner in this way. It is kind of difficult to play this style, but if the team understands how to support a top laner who is taking on additional gold and the responsibility to carry a game, then it just opens up another avenue for Damwon to be competitive at the World Championship, because we already know that their mid lane is one of the best mid laners in the world, Showmaker. So it's just another way that they can win. They're really a top half of the map team, so their solo laners, top lane and mid lane, are really the more important lanes, and they don't really ask their bot lane to carry often. So even when they have like a really good scoreline or something, they're mostly on cleanup duty. My allergies are starting to act up. So that's enough for Nagri. Like I said, I think Nagri is the best carry top laner at Worlds. Maybe we get some great performances out of the people in the A and B tier that I was talking about, but if we get great carry performances, I would expect them from Nagri. And if somebody outperforms Nagri, I would expect it to be 369. So 369, a very good top lane player, extremely volatile, but I'm the kind of player who loves the shy, so I love that volatility. It doesn't bother me at all. It's like in traditional sports where like if you're a fan of professional football and you watch a quarterback throw 4 picks because they're trying to come back into a game, that's not the same as like throwing 4 picks on your first 4 drives and losing the game for your team. If your team is already behind, you need to try to make up that the disadvantage that's already been created. So I respect that, and it takes a special kind of player to take on that burden for their team, especially in the top lane where not every top laner is asked to do that. So we see Renekton, we see Aatrox. He's 369 is probably one of the best Aatroxes in the world. Mordekaiser, Kennen, Renekton, Kayle, Sion, Urgot. So we are seeing a lot of the champions that we want to see. We do have Lucian. Did we get a Kali? So we don't have a Kali, but based on what I've seen from 369 on all of the other champions that 369 plays, I just assume that 369 can play a Kali at a very high level. And I am positive that a Kali will be an impactful champion at the World Championship unless everybody overreacts to her recent nerf, which is basically not a big nerf at all. Last but not least, we have Zoom. And at the mid-season invitational, everybody was saying that Zoom was one of the best players in the world and was easily the best top laner in the world. And I think that he is definitely one of the best top laners in the world. And Zoom is the best top laner playing tanks in the world right now. I think that is like indisputable. So right when Zoom came in after the COVID situation that Zoom experienced, they went undefeated. 7 games on Ornn, which is a tank. Helps initiate, but is not a great peeler. It's a little bit more aggressive, and it works really well with top esports because typically top esports will have an advantage in the mid game, and they'll be able to use the initiation from Ornn to like capitalize on their advantage and snowball further. We have Set. Set is good when they're winning or when they're losing. Set can create like huge plays for the team. Mordekaiser, a very good champion, good at helping objective control by ripping either junglers or priority targets into the death realm and keeping them out of a team fight for an extended period of time. And then we have Gangplank, we have Maokai, we have Renekton. It's not a question of can Zoom play these other things. It's do JDG need Zoom to play these other champions when they have somebody like Kanavi. So I think Zoom probably has additional upside to carry games, but because of the style that the team plays with Kanavi as their jungler, it's just not necessary. And if anything, it just opens up a lot, some more losing chances for them. Because as long as they focus completely on having Kanavi on like junglers that can dominate the early game and help the game get out of control, then they're going to be very competitive at the World Championship. So, like I said, Bin, 369, and Nogri are the 3 best top laners at the World Championship. It doesn't mean that they will win every lane or that their team will win every single game, but they are the players who are most likely to contribute to the winning difference of their team. Players in the A tier, I think, are also likely to have good performances at Worlds, at least from the optics test, because I think their teams will be relatively competitive. And in games where they're playing against lesser competition or lesser top laners, they should be able to carry if asked to, and otherwise they'll just do their job, get to the mid game, and help their team win. In the B tier, we have Blippo and Broken Blade. I think they are potentially like they can go up to that A tier, but if they had terrible performances and ended up being D tier, I wouldn't be shocked either. And then in the D tier, it's mostly because I don't like the style of champions they play. I don't like the style that they basically play Zoom style, but aren't as good as Zoom, and that's not the best way to play League of Legends right now in this meta anyways. So maybe we get a completely different meta than what we've seen for the past 5 months. But I haven't seen anything in the patches that suggests that should be a possibility. Teams kind of do whatever they want sometimes. But I'm fairly confident that we'll see something similar to what we see now. So thanks for watching. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my tiers. Otherwise, thanks for watching. And watch out for the other positional tier lists. Talk to you later.